Good morning and welcome to the August 8th, 2023 Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I'll ask our general counsel to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Chu. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Master. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here. All right, good morning again and welcome to our public hearing and public meeting of August 8th, 2023. This meeting is being held in person at our hearing room at the David M. Dinkins Municipal Building at 1 Center Street. We are also allowing the meeting to be held via Zoom so that the public and one of our commissioners will be participating remotely as well. And if you'd just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so by going to our YouTube channel and looking for the hearing. And we'll begin this morning with our public hearing agenda for applications for work on designated properties. And I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the agenda.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 23-11231. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the borough of Brooklyn, block 1207, lot 53, 1235 Dean Street in the Crown Heights North Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival style row house designed by Albert E. White, built circa 1891. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicant has entered the hearing. Tom, you now have control of the presentation. If you could just click on your screen.
Okay.
Advance the slides using perfect. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Okay. My name is Tom Vandenbad. I'm representing NV Design Architecture. In this application in the Crown Heights North Historic District is for construction of a penthouse addition to the subject property. Let's see, how do I change? There we go. Okay. So these are the floor plans. The penthouse addition is would otherwise be approvable at staff level were it not for a gap on Pacific Street to the north between a couple buildings that are outside of the district. But we've done as much as we can to minimize the size and the view of the house or the addition. It's not visible from Dean Street from any place. There's the visibility from the front. It is essentially fully visible from the back. It's set back from the front by about 11 feet and from the back a little 7.6 and has a minimal interior height of 8 feet and about 9 feet from the 9 feet overall. That's the existing. These are the views from the front. There is a mock-up in place in these photos, but you just can't see any of it. There's a building to the right that has a vertical extension of a full floor all the way front to back. And to the left, there's a sort of a false pediment on the front. And this is our, this is the layout. It's essentially a bedroom suite that's associated with the single unit below. These will be a multiple dwelling condominium. And then there's a stair bulkhead that's a communal stair bulkhead to the west that it accesses a new shared roof terrace in the middle that's also set back from the front. There are AC units there for the building, and then the bedroom suite with its own roof terrace in the back that's set back from that secondary facade. And that's the section. It's very, very simple were it not for the fireman's access ladders that are required for the roof, new roof. We have it's clad in stucco. The idea is that this is a very background and simple massing. The stucco doesn't have any real articulation. It's not. It doesn't have any reflectivity. It's really meant to be a background project rather than a sort of signature architectural thing. These are more sections. A couple of details of just, the wood windows, the AC units, very simple metal picket railings. These are the views. So there's a relatively large gap for a driveway between an apartment building and this freestanding residential building of the back. On the left is the larger photo is what you can actually see when all of the trees have dropped their leaves. On the right is what you can see when the trees are leafed. So maybe 8 or 9 months out of the year, something like that, half the year. And yeah, these are the windswept mock-up photos. These are more photos of the front, more photos of the back. The left is pretty typical. The right has the previous mock-up. The mock-up actually, based on staff, LPC staff comments, we were able to lower the roof line of that about 2 feet. So that mock-up is about 2 feet higher than it would otherwise be. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Just a curious question, not necessarily super important, but you're showing in your sections a very skinny assembly for your roof. How are you doing that?
Let me go back to it.
It's only interesting, I think, because so many applicants struggle with that when we push back on visibility, and you're doing miracles, so we want to know about it. That's done.
Yeah, obviously there's no slope shown in those roofs. I think that the salient height is the height of the little parapet, so that allows for maybe an extra few inches in that assembly. But you're right, that's probably drawn a little thin from what it'll end up being.
Okay,
it's all light metal construction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
I would just add that if you need 8 or 9 inches of insulation, and so I agree with Commissioner Gold.
I thought he was using maybe that refrigerator stuff, like there's super thin, high cost, I don't know.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's see if we have any public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone in the room. I'll turn it over to Gregory Collett to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand. The first we'll be hearing from is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. Appear to be getting an error promoting Lucy Levine, so I'm going to try promoting John Graham from the Victorian Society. Still getting errors. So would somebody else be able to? I should be the co-host. Yes, I am co-host.
Gregory, I'll try promoting Lucy Levine.
Thank you, Abby. I apologize for the delay here.
Hi, commissioners. Thanks for promoting me, everybody. All right. HTC finds this proposal insufficiently detailed and does not support it at this time. The applicant has not provided enough information on the proposed materiality of this addition, especially given its substantial rear facade visibility. We therefore ask the commission to require that this applicant further develop this scheme before taking any action. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, okay, I'm still getting errors. And next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from the Victorian Society. So John Graham, we will be promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. I think somebody else promoted.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The applicant's proposed rooftop addition is essentially a stucco box. Unfortunately, this box is fully visible from Pacific Street, and the architect has made no attempt to use architectural elements to unify the proposed addition and the existing rear facade. We share the commissioner's reluctance to redesign proposals, but we think some simple modifications would enable us to find the proposal appropriate, whereas we recommend denial as it is. They include providing the rear facade of the addition with 3 openings aligned with the openings on the floors below, and each with a lintel matching those on the lower floors. A full height opening can provide access to the terrace, and the fire ladder can be relocated to one of the wall spaces between the openings. Finally, the new stucco on the addition should match the color of the stucco cladding on the lower floors. The obtrusiveness of the redesigned facade when seen from Pacific Street would be substantially reduced. Otherwise, we urge denial of this work, the sort of proposal which should not be seen in any historic district. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 8 recommends approval, and we also received a letter of approval from the Crown Heights North Association. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carol.
Thank you, Gregory. All right, Tom. So we have support from the Community Board and the Crown Heights North Association, but we did hear some comments or questions from 2 others this morning. So would you like to respond to those comments?
Sure. I mean, I think we'd be happy to, look at the fenestration on the back. Part of the reason we kept it so simple was because we wanted it to be truly a background thing, and that the visibility we feel is so small throughout the year. It's a momentary view walking down the sidewalk on Pacific Street. It's out of the district, and for most of the year you can't see this at all. But adjustments can be made, obviously. We'd be happy to.
So, Tom, what color is the stucco that you're proposing?
It's a gray. We can easily change that to beige, obviously.
Okay.
The rear of the house is, I'd have to check exactly what it's being redone, but we, under a staff level approval, we're restoring the entire house below under separate permit. And I don't recall what the color of that stucco is. So I'd, obviously it would need to be coordinated with that approval.
Okay, right. And you could work with the staff in the field on that. And
Thanks, person.
the simple picket fence, I think, looks dense in this rendering, but if I'm wondering, is that the rendering or is that, how, I mean, I guess you're 4 inches apart, but how thick are your pickets?
Oh, they're 1/4 inch. They're very small. So I'm sure it's the rendering that makes it appear much more dense than it is. But we could also paint that a gray instead of a black. Or whatever the color of the stucco ends up being, if it's approved.
Great. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, I think we'll make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. And Commissioner Bland, I'll ask you to unmute for this as well. All right. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is for a rooftop addition that in terms of its dimensions, its height and setback from the front and rear meets the sort of technical criteria of the staff rule for a staff level permit, except that it is visible through this alley between 2 buildings on Pacific Street. I think he said outside of the district. And so you catch this sort of incidental sort of view of it as you walk past this sort of, I guess, 20-foot gap. And at some point during the year through trees. The applicant has expressed willingness to work with the staff on finishes, so we can think about that in our discussion. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Yes, thank you. So in general, I think this is fine. I'm a little concerned about the roof thickness, but that's something that hopefully can be worked out with staff. I actually think the gray is preferable in matching the color below because it makes it clear what's an addition and what's original. Whoops. And so I think it's approvable and working with staff.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I think it's appropriate. I think the idea of working with staff is on the fenestration is a good one. I think you really got to be able to say visible rooftop addition that we do approve occasionally. I think that not to harp on the roof thing, but I think when the roof is kind of figured out, you'll actually have a better relationship between the fenestration and the building as a whole. Right now, it looks like they're going to extreme measures to kind of detail this full height glazing that it clearly is not their intention. And I think that actually I'd be okay with the thing being a tad higher if it gives it a more normal look.
Right, thanks. Commissioner Holford-Smith?
I agree. I think also the choice of black for the metal is maybe the wrong color, brings too much attention to it. So maybe a gray or some other color that sort of blends in with the background would be more appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with all the commissioners' comments. I only want to add one, and I think the alignment of the back facade windows would add.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
I think it is.
Okay. And Vice Chair Bland?
I think I'm in agreement with what's been said. I think the problem is with the rendering, not with the detailing of the fence. So I think that'll be worked out. And the color of it also has been suggested should not be black, but more the color of the stucco.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just note for the record that Commissioner Lutfi is recused on this item. All right, so I think we'll have enough to support this proposal with the condition that they continue to work closely with the staff on the finish of the railing and the stucco, and to work on the final details of the roof line and its relationship to the windows.
Like,
Yes, sorry, Commissioner Ginsburg, did you make that motion?
With regard to LPC 23-11231, 1235 Dean Street, Crown Heights, North Historic District, a wilderness revival style row house designed by Albert E. White and built circa 1891. Application is to construct a rooftop addition. There's me as I recommend approval, finding that the construction of the proposed rooftop addition will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the rooftop addition will not be visible over the front facade and will only be visible through a driveway on Pacific Street over the rear facade of the building, that the rooftop addition will be set back from the rear facade and will not obscure the original volume of the building, that the scale of the rooftop addition as seen in conjunction with the larger apartment building to its east will not overwhelm the building or its neighbors, and that the material, fenestration, and details of the rooftop addition will be keeping with the character of the rooftop additions within the Crown House North Historic District. We would ask the applicant to work with staff on the detailing the roof thickness and details, and also the railing and stucco finishes.
And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum. Aye. Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
We should note that Commissioner Lefty has recused herself.
I did that. Okay, all right, so,
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
all right. Okay, so that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff as you finalize those details and finishes. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you, commissioners.
Right, the next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-12306, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, block 8047, lot 1, 200 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Hill Historic District. This is a Mediterranean revival style house built in 1927. The application is to legalize constructing garden walls, modifying a stair, installing infill and paving in compliance with C of A 21-02054, and excavation without an LPC permit, and to modify a parapet railing and install infill and paving.
Good morning. My name is Frank Watella. I'm an architect representing Mr. and Mrs. Alessandro here for the revision to the 200 Hollywood Avenue application. I'll start the presentation by showing a photograph of the current condition constructed recently. We are here to address separate applications and some as-built conditions. Can you all hear me right? This is a site plan which was also previously approved. Which is the side yard, or we like to call it rear yard of the property, where most of the alterations or amendments to this application are happening. Some historic photographs, one from the 40s, one from the 80s. The 40s photograph shows the building in its current condition without a vestibule. The 80s photograph shows a vestibule portico on the Hollywood Avenue side with stairs perpendicular to Hollywood. This is the site plan, it's sort of a key diagram of where we're presenting some changes on the application, each numbered, and each might have a subcategory as well. These 3 site plans are indicating the one to the far left, the existing condition prior to the landmarks application and the Department of Buildings application. The one in the center was as landmarks had approved under my application, with work to the yards, a rear or a side yard, small addition along Center Drive, a walkway and a patio at that same area along Center Drive. The one to the right is the condition indicating all the changes, where we enlarged the patio along the Center Drive side. We enlarged some of the retaining walls that are basically there for one purpose, and to retain soil and prevent water from flowing onto our property from the neighbors. The walkway or patio in front, parallel with the building along Center, was enlarged as well. The front steps, top platform also widened a bit. And on the Hollywood Avenue side, the side yard adjacent to the neighbor was enhanced and brought further out towards Hollywood with a paved area and a retaining wall. Some of the conditions, basically reasons why we had to file these applications and sort of enhance the home and prevent lots of water infiltration coming from our neighbors, showing the wood frame building, some of the wood rotting, interior partitions taking on water, windows and walls the same. These two slides depict the previously approved application on top and the proposed changes on the bottom. Let's start from the top of the photograph on the bottom, where one change was to address the small retaining wall along Center Drive, which was pulled further out towards the street. A door, which was a period correct in lieu of a round top door, we elected to put a square top door with lights in it. And the small addition above that arch, let me point it out for you, of that arched area here, previously was approved with a small parapet on top of the addition and a railing above, for code reasons. And same thing there, the change indicates that the parapet was removed and we just elongated the railing. It also prevents water from lying on the roof and then being discharged. This one allows the water to run off freely. Okay, these two are a little bit of enlarged site plan indicating the side yard or the rear yard along Center, which is basically the only open recreation area or area for open space on the property that's usable. Previously approved, the retaining wall was in line with the prolongation of the extension along Center, and we elected to push it out further towards Center, retaining a bit more soil, taking advantage of a little bit more usable area in that yard space. Enlarged elevations, the wall facing basically head on from Center, initially had a series of piers with railings in between. The new wall, we removed the piers, we removed the railings as well, and the wall, since it is actually further towards Center, it actually is retaining a bit more soil at a higher capacity. And if you notice on this dash line here indicates the level of the patio, which is almost coincident with the level of the sidewalk within that yard space. Conditions under construction. How the wall, you can see that's retaining soil from the neighbor on the right, which is quite a bit higher than us. The top middle photograph here is the actual interior corner as the wall runs along his property, and then our property here along Center. Another shot from standing pretty much above the grade here, looking into the yard. The wall is not that visible from the street. And then you could see how along the parallel side yard with our neighbor, we're pretty much a few inches above alignment with his soil. Another straight shot head on during the course of construction, which is quite recent. You could see how the soil here is quite a bit higher than our grade inside above the sidewalk level. An enlarged elevation showing how we propose to enlarge the width of the stairs which enter the front portico or the front door along Hollywood Avenue. Previously approved was about 5'6". We're proposing 7. Some photographs of a condition before approvals and then during construction on here on the right. looking from Hollywood Avenue towards the front door, and this is looking from center towards the front. Enlarged elevations indicating the change to the arch top door to a square top door with lights. Under construction photographs, the door still needs to be restored, but it is installed. Photographs pretty much head on or straight shot at the facade from center with an existing prior to construction and then during construction. These are elevations facing north, standing in the yard. Previously approved elevation showed a small parapet with a railing on that small addition. And then the condition as we propose without the parapet, just a longer or a taller railing and the piers. It also indicates that the previously approved retaining wall along parallel with center is in line with the prolongation of that extension, and then the wall was pushed out 8 feet 3 inches to basically take account for some more yard space. Again, under construction. This is a photograph looking south along the neighbor on Center Drive. The key plan will indicate where we are. The retaining wall here was built, again, main reason is to stop the water from flowing onto our property. What we discovered during the course of construction was that most of the neighbors' stormwater discharge was flowing onto our land. So we elected to build the wall just a bit higher and let the water or force the water to actually run towards the street and then retain it somehow with the soil, the grass, and the planting vegetated area. This is prior to any construction. The wall is actually currently in place here where these evergreens are. This is the wall along Center Drive, and this is the condition at the prior to construction underneath that extension. During the course of construction, here's our discovery. We found that the neighbor had some unsightly additions on his building. We discovered some stormwater or leader lines that were actually just flowing freely onto our site. And we elected to actually just put a stop to it by having the water divert to a vegetated area in the front along Center and prevent it from coming onto our property. During the course of construction, the walls erected, not finished yet. They're not clad with stone, but they are reinforced concrete. So they do step down from the far end or the eastern side of the property toward the western side. And this is the wall that is along Center. This is the wall that is running east-west on the center elevation. And then the photograph also indicates there's only about a 6-inch reveal above grade. This is the previously approved elevation, I guess the east elevation, where we had the yard partially excavated along the entire facade of that building. We elected to excavate a bit more, free up some space along the side yard, again, preventing lots of water and infiltration into our wood frame structure. It dried it up. It gave us also the opportunity to take the air conditioning condensing units and house them in that recessed area and free from view from the street or the neighbors. Current condition, actually, I'm sorry, existing condition of the wall that runs north-south along the Hollywood Avenue yard, I guess, along that yard was a natural rock wall. Lots of stormwater runoff from our neighbors. During this time that we were constructing and enhancing our building, the neighbor actually did some regrading and raised his grade a bit. Again, allowing more of his stormwater to run onto our property. Then we addressed it by installing that concrete wall a bit further towards Hollywood and letting the water divert to the planted area in the front of both of the properties. Current conditions under construction. This is the wall that runs along the Hollywood Avenue yard. That corner condition is in here. Walls are constructed, not clad yet with stone, and these are the finishes that we're proposing on those walls. The elevation along Hollywood Avenue, previously approved landmarks application indicated the front steps with a straight picket rail. And one window being replaced in that portico, which was, I believe, not period correct. Steel casement window with a round top. The owner, Mr. Alessandro, was digging through the attic during the renovation and came across a steel casement, partially leaded glass window, which was initially framed on the interior portion of that wall before the portico was constructed. So we are proposing to get the window reconditioned, refinished, and reinstall it on the exterior wall of the portico, which is a bit further out from where it was originally installed. As you can see from Hollywood Avenue as well, the stairs and the platform don't really have an impact on that view or that facade or elevation. Previously approved site plan on the left, you could see where we're proposing to excavate the side yard just a bit more. I believe it's 14 feet 6 inches further towards Hollywood. Again, giving us an opportunity to house the air conditioning condensing units and give the opportunity for the homeowner to have that wall be dry constantly and manage the stormwater runoff from our neighbor. We do propose to landscape the entire front of that yard and also to conceal the wall with some densely planted evergreen shrubbery. So it's not seasonal. It'll always be covered. This is the current condition under construction along Hollywood. Again, not landscaped yet. The walls are not clad with stone yet, but this is how it exists. Actually, I'm going to go back to that slide where you can see how this was previously covered with soil and causing rot on the condition of the wall. Here's the window that was previously framed in the old facade of the building. Then the portico was actually built out further. The window framing was still in the wall. The header, I believe, was still there, and this window was recovered. And we intend to install it on the exterior wall of the portico. Site plans showing the change or the proposed change to the patio or walkway that is parallel along the center drive elevation. To the far left is the original condition prior to Landmark's approval. The middle image shows what we had initially got approved, which was just a walkway. And the owners realized that it does have some good exposure, it does lots of sun, and maybe a little bit of a shot towards the water, Little Neck Bay. They elected to keep the patio and just repave it with stone to match the rest of the proposed stone on the property. Conditions under construction and the proposed stone pavers for both the rear yard and the patio and walkway. Current conditions as well under construction. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum and then Commissioner Ginsburg.
So it seems like the net result of your changes has been a not insignificant increase in the amount of impervious ground cover. Is it your view that that is typical for houses of this size in this district? Or is it, to me, it seems like it's a little bit much, but am I not knowing the district well enough?
Well, this lot is non-typical for the matter. It's a very small lot. It also has very unique characteristic as it's carved into a hill on both sides of the property are into a hill, and there's not much outdoor usable space on the lot. So to optimize the yard, LA, the children, and being that it's unique here in, let me get to the corner, into the inside corner here. Yeah. We like to just pave a bit more area here and then take care of the water problem that our neighborhood's quite a bit higher than us. I'd say it's probably 4 or 5 feet higher than us in elevation without stormwater retention. So it's unique that it's small in size and there's not much yard usable space or private yard usable space on the property. So that's the main reason, is to take care of water and optimize the usable space.
So I understand the grading and I understand the retaining walls and all that. But I'm having a little trouble with the extent to which you make that new space impervious as opposed to grass or plants or whatever at a lower level to achieve all the things that you're looking to achieve. I'm just trying to see from a kind of contextual perspective how what you're arguing for is appropriate.
Yeah.
So
That's why it's pretty unique, and like I say, it's a corner. There's not much actually yard usable space, and we are electing to keep much of the front yard green space impervious. I'm sorry, where the stormwater could actually permeate the soil here, and then the impervious surface, basically the only increase to the impervious surface is a slight increase here about 8 feet, and then a slight increase here about 5 or 6 feet by 14.
Right. I'm less worried about it from a kind of septic civil perspective than I am from a contextual perspective. But the district is characterized by a kind of suburban site development pattern. And, to the extent that this varies from it, it goes to the question of appropriateness. That's all.
Okay, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I have a few questions. The first one is, you made changes during construction. Instead of coming to the staff, potentially the commission, you just did them. And now you're saying, oh, we didn't approve it. Why didn't you follow proper procedure?
A lot of it is discovery during the course of construction, where on the previous slides, you could see that as we're excavating, as we're performing some of the site work, we've noticed that much of the stormwater from our neighbors was being or flowing into our site naturally. And then some of it was sort of on purpose, because Anthony, Mr. Alessandro's quite, he's a new owner, but I'm certain that the previous owners before didn't pay much attention. It was very much overgrown and that sort of thing. So I guess also for time constraints, many of that reason was to just keep going. It's not about it, but it's something that we had to address immediately. We have plenty of documentation on how water is.
I don't doubt that. That doesn't, the question is that why didn't, but thank you. Next question. You said you lowered the parapet and put in the railing to meet code. Why didn't the original design meet code? Because I don't see.
It's a code compliant railing. I didn't say to meet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a code compliant railing. And same heights, 40.
Thirdly, the reuse of the existing window, which I presume is not insulated and thermally broken. How are you going to meet energy code modern requirements?
It doesn't. It's in a vestibule. It's in an unconditioned space outside the thermal boundary of the entire building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Holford Smith.
On the terrace where you said that you wanted to eliminate the parapet and bring the roof down and extend the height, lower the extent of the railing to let the water, you said, run off freely. How are you controlling the water from that terrace?
So previously there was a roof drain installed in that space. Now we're actually proposing to slight pitch with a gutter on the rear end of it there. So this proposed gutter right here. So the water actually flows from left to right down into a gutter. And then we have dry wells and area drains at the patio level, as opposed to a roof drain where the water would actually be contained in here, and lots of foliage, lots of large mature trees in the area. There's a tendency to frequently clog roof drains. It causes for a lot more maintenance too.
So you have a gutter that goes presumably to a leader?
Yeah, gutter into a leader right down to area drains in that entire patio system.
And so in this sort of concrete bathtub that you've created, you have drains.
Correct, with dry wells as well. There's a series of dry wells along the whole yard space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, not seeing any other questions. Let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right, not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups for remote participation. The first we'll be hearing from is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is strongly opposed to this legalization. We are chagrined that the applicant went to the trouble of getting permits for proposed work, then disregarded those permits to pursue other work. The applicant's current application does not make clear why they chose to pursue changes that were different than the ones permitted. We find the non-compliant work to be inappropriate and ask the commission to deny this legalization. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from the Victorian Society in New York. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Normally, the VSNY wouldn't comment on alterations at a house built in 1927. However, in this case, we feel that one of the changes made without permits is so egregious and destructive that we had to offer testimony. We refer to the removal of the historic round-headed door opening at the ground floor, right side of the center drive facade, and the installation of a new square-headed door opening in this location. The historic solid round-headed door has been discarded and the altered opening filled with a pair of wooden glass doors. The applicants note on the drawings that the illegally installed square-headed opening provides both balance as well as not to deduct from the arch top window located just off center from the elevation, unquote. In other words, the applicant has decided that in 1927, the original architect and client hadn't the ability to decide the correct number and location for round-headed openings on this facade. And so 96 years later, they should be permitted to correct that architect's mistakes. Commissioners, this is the opposite of historic preservation, a deliberate act which has destroyed significant details of a designated landmark. We urge you in the strongest possible way to deny this part of the proposal. We also urge you to allow no further increase in paved areas, which were already substantially increased by the 2020 permit. This is supposed to be a suburban historic district. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thanks so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Queens Community Board 11 recommends denial. And we also received a letter from the Douglaston and Little Neck Historical Society. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. All right. I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments.
To the second
Okay, thank you.
comments about
And if the owner would like to speak, you may do so as well. Just state your name before you speak. Okay.
just a comment about the round-headed door changed to a square-headed door. There was no previous door. There was a railing and an opening, and it might look that there was a door there previously because there might have been wood behind it to prevent people or leaves and so on from going into the yard, but it was a railing, not a door. That's it. Okay, I'll let Mr. Alessandro.
Just state in case we want to jump around.
Go ahead. Make sure you miss it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Alessandro. I'm the homeowner. I'd like to thank you all for your time. I'd just like to give you a little history. This was a kit home from Sears, or I think it was Home Security in 1927. It was a bungalow. It came without a basement. The previous owner, they basically built it on the top of a hill, but they decided to make like a bank barn, and they ended up at the end putting in a garage and a basement, but they were never even attached. So somewhere in the 70s, they put a staircase. But where that door is that the gentleman said was that was a patio at one point that was legalized, and the extension was enclosed. And they just had that archway, but that was open, as you could see from some of the photos. The front door was originally square, not as you could see from there. Go back one, Frank. You could see the header, and you could see from the 1930s photo, the front door where the glass is. Please. I think it's forward. Okay. Well, stop 1 second. You can see the door. The front door was originally square, and it had that stained glass window that I found in the attic. It was all the way in the corner of the attic. I had to go in the crawl space to find it. And so I know that's the original. Can you go back to where the stained glass on the interior is from the framing? Okay. Yeah, perfect. If you look, Frank, do you have your laser? You can see the original square door and you can see the framing for the window. The front door was square. The only archway in the whole house was the window with the balcony. So, the doors that I put are from Armagini in Jersey City that I proposed to replace the arch door. They're period appropriate. They were restored. They're mission style. They have the interior screw shutter, and I think they match very well. The way this style works, Mediterranean revival or Spanish revival, there's an alternating of archway and flat tops in the architecture. So we have the archway leading to the yard with the gate. So I think that that's an appropriate view. As far as the neighborhood and the green space versus the hard space, we moved there because we like it. It's very bucolic. What we did were site specific. We have a tremendous amount of water damage through the years through erosion, and the fact that the neighbors, the one built up the wall to the left here, and the one in the back built an illegal extension all the way to the property line, and then put a permanent deck on it, and all the water was draining onto my property. So that's where that wall is towards Arley Street, which is the other wall. And then the design that was approved the last time, if you could show the three, please, Frank, from the original to so you could see one back. You can see he built, first of all, the setback he built onto the back of the property, which is the only house in the manor that's built on the back of the property. And then they built an illegal extension in the downstairs all the way to the property line. And they built a permanent roof on top of that and hit it with a deck. And so that's why it's up in there. But where Frank is showing the white, you could see that's where all the water is coming from. Their roof and that deck was coming on to me. And I don't know if it's still there, but you see the original foundation of the fence between the two properties. It's above that pipe. I don't know if you have it still on that photo because we took it out. But anyway, that's the original height of the fence between the two yards. And I'd just like to show the approved plan. I think it's the third slide, maybe from the beginning, where you show what was there and then what was approved, and then the renderings from
This one.
the two back, I think. Again. Okay, so if you look from what was approved, you see the wall between me and my neighbor on in the middle one. We bumped out there because I was getting the water. That's the elevation. We didn't do anything. We went down. We didn't go up. And from the street, everything is not visible. It's very clean, and we're going to landscape everything. But when we bumped out there, I was getting water also from that corner, and we just extended the yard. I don't have the laser, but you see this? This wall was here, and it was sticking up 2 feet. With this down, or 3 feet even, and we just bumped out to meet that. That was the decision, because aesthetically having that wall there wasn't nice anyway, and I was getting water from this way running over. So we just bumped out and we carried the grade, and then we gently sloped it through here. But we have I have wells that I'm catching all the water. My neighbors are very supportive. I can furnish letters, and I was getting water in the house constantly, and it was undermining my footing in that area. And then we had water damage on numerous occasions when there was heavy downpours. So I would appreciate that. We didn't do anything to defy you. I apologize. When the guys were working, it's a small job. Everybody was backlogged with COVID and everything else. And when they're putting the molds up, they're pouring. It's a decision if it's, going to do 6 feet or 6 feet, 6 inches, that was made on site. So I apologize if I didn't try to defy your previous approvals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just have one quick question. So in the approved plan, we approved a little paved sort of pathway to go from the side, the path on Center Drive to the excavated area behind the retaining wall, right? And so that now that the retaining wall is pushed out, it kind of aligns with that. Are there grade changes between what was approved and what's there now, what's being proposed now?
There's
Yeah.
a small step from here down to the level of the yard. It's probably 6 or 7 inches. Yeah,
And when it was, and in the approved scheme, was it,
same thing.
Same thing.
There's a step here.
okay. All
Yeah,
right,
I'd just like to add that I guess somewhere between what was there previously to what was approved the second time. They had mentioned exposed aggregate and there was no exposed aggregate anywhere. And so I had pavers previously. I wanted to put pavers again. And I
Yeah, well, that's what I'm explaining. There's a slight increase in that walkway, this little corner, and that's the increase, and then it's.
Yeah.
And everything else is pretty much the same.
So I just like to say, this was, I think, 12 feet. I don't remember off the top of my head. And there was there was an entrance here with stairs as well to go down. The previous owner was one of these guys that he kind of jerry-rigged everything. So he had raised the yard because he found rocks and he didn't want to clear the rocks. So that was exacerbating the problem too. So when the water would come from here, it would come into the house, which that house was the lowest point, even in this corner as well, was a water problem. And so here we elected just to kind of, this was a nice feature. And if you put all the landscaping close to the windows, you don't see anything because you see the facade again. There's a ground window, 3 panel window. That's a family room that, this allows more lighting. And so I didn't go to 12 feet. I think we went at a 10 feet. But if you can go back to. Yeah, so this window, if you go in at 4 feet and you put any kind of, we want some privacy, but at the same time, we want light. And the 4 feet was just a little narrow. And when you look at the way the rest of the pathways from here and then from over here, it just made sense to come out. Thank you.
all right.
We're maintaining that patio dimension as well. So we proposed initially to narrow the width. We just couldn't maintain what was currently there, or previously there.
Okay. Commissioners, any other final questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
It is illegal for your neighbor to be dumping water on your property. And I realize relationships with neighbors can be tricky, but did you talk to the neighbor about modifying what they had so you didn't have as much of a water problem?
Yeah, I did. I got along very well with them. I discussed these plans. The neighborhood is very close-knit and we have to live with the neighbors. There's some water that we would like to furnish you plans to that effect. But the neighbor previously, the way we solved it, we had to put in my cost was $4,000. I had to put something on the old wall to kind of catch the water and try to get it out because when we deal with it. But his yard, we bumped into a hill and we just.
I think it's like 6 feet plus higher.
He was like 18, previously it was like 18 inches on the low end and 24 inches higher. And then it would just fall off onto this low wall, that rock wall that was falling apart. So the water just poured in. I have videos since, in fact, which is and so the one in the back, he said that the previous builder built it, it was all grandfathered in, the previous owner that put the house from. They built it all the way, that's all illegal and the way the water was running, but yeah, I don't want to fight with them, but I don't want the water on me anymore. I put the dry wells, if the water comes, it's going in the groundwater line, it's not going anywhere else, but I can't undermine the work I did in the foundation house, it's an engineering. The lot's illegal, irregular lot, and it's very unlike anything else in the manor. It just so happens that Sector Drive is on the neighborhood, and in particular, it's a small lot, not a double lot. And typically, the small lots are 60 by 100, 110, and this one happens to be 66, but then it gets very narrow in the back, and that's a little bit why I guess the bump out looks a little bit more, to your concern, Commissioner with the Hudson.
Yes, Commissioner Chen.
Just out of curiosity, are you connected to the public sewer or are you on a septic system?
No, it's all septic. It's one of the few.
So what is your lot area? Your lot area is 10,000 square feet?
No, less.
Hello?
I thought your Douglaston Hill Douglaston Historic District requires a minimum of 10,000. Yeah.
Well, that's this lot predates zoning as well. That's good.
I think we just need Mr. Alessandro to speak closer to the mic when you speak, just so the Zoom picks it up.
Sorry, no, I was just saying previously, just the lot is one of the smaller lots and it's irregular shaped, so it may look like the hardscapes are a little bit more egregious than maybe somewhere else. But again, with the landscaping and the way the yard is set lower and the low wall, it's just a retaining wall. It really aesthetically, it looks very nice. And I promise, I'm going to have a landscape architect design and make sure everything incorporates using appropriate plans.
I'll get back to your question about the lot size. Yeah, it's the lot predates zoning. So yeah, it's R12 zoning, 60 by 100, 5,800 square feet minimum. It's under.
I think the previous slide has an aerial view of your site, or maybe a couple before. Go. Right before this, there. So that's your lot on the corner. It does seem like the other lots are fairly small also. And there is paving on the fourth house in on Hollywood Avenue. I don't know if we know anything about that amount of paving.
Lots of circular driveways, backyard pavers with pools, patios, pergolas, lots of impervious surface, garages with very long driveways towards the entire length of the property or the rear of the property. So I don't think we're that much out of character. I think it's just a bit odd because we're a corner, we're exposed on two sides, and we're just trying to optimize some usable yard space.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the next houses that are in the same class, that they go towards the east, they will have long driveways with the garage in the back and the patio area. Their hardscapes and green area is probably the same ratios.
Okay.
It's just that we're on the corner and it looks empty.
Okay, any final questions? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we're going to begin our discussion. So as we've seen, the commission previously approved expanding the paving and constructing retaining walls to the side and to the back and creating a new stair and walkway around the front. As part of that proposal, we also approved reducing the paving at the front patio. And so the proposal today is to request that the commission legalize and further approve expansions to the work that we've already approved, including pushing out the retaining wall at the side of the property above the path, extending the retaining wall and excavated area behind the house, and then widening the stair, the previously approved stairs. And then there's a door change and a window change as well. So we'll discuss the site work and then the window and door changes as we begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Putting aside the issue of asking forgiveness as opposed to asking for permission, I think we have to view this as if it, like we usually do, as if it were coming to us for permission, before it's being done. And with that in mind, I think that the presentation alone doesn't give me the sense of context that I would hope for if I were being asked to approve this extent of hardscape. So in the absence of that kind of quantitative analysis of other similar sites in the district, which there seem to be a number of, I would ask the applicant to not modify the retaining walls or the drainage systems that have already been put in place, but to modify the surface of that lower level yard that has been created by those retaining walls, and to work with the staff to reduce it in a meaningful quantity. I don't know what that would be. I would leave that to the staff to discern based on their better knowledge of the district. But I would emphasize the visibility of that green space or that pervious space from the street. I think that would lead me to kind of prioritize that front patio that the applicant was talking about as a good place to look, because that is visible to the street. I think that modifying the north-facing 1C, which is another area that can be seen from the street, probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think that's probably okay as is, but the area 1A is, I think, you'd feel that from the street, I think, at least to the extent that I can see. I think staff should look with the applicant at the little retaining wall to the right of the number 1A that was visible in some of the photos and make sure that that's being finished in a way that's consistent with the district. I would ask that I don't think he mentioned it, but to make sure that the stone veneer for those walls is true stone and not concrete faux stone. I think that the changes to the envelope of the building are appropriate. I think the use of the recovered window and the rectangular doors with lights is period appropriate and doesn't seem to me to be out of step. I think the widening of the front steps is actually a benefit to how the house is experienced from Center Drive and won't affect the Hollywood Avenue experience of the house. I think that the modifications to the railings at the patio at the south side are appropriate and fine. And I think the applicant should generally work with the staff carefully on how those retaining walls and the spaces created by them are experienced from the street.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's assessment. I think it probably is more hardscape than we would have approved if we were seeing this application for the first time. But I think, given where we are, I think that the south yard we can legalize. I agree that the paving is important, and the fact that it's basically, like I said before, we've got a concrete bathtub back there. If they can soften that plantings and not have it be such a hardscape. I think that the one thing they could do is to reduce the width of that front patio and bring back some landscaping to the street. But also looking carefully at what that paving is with staff. And I guess I can approve the rest of the changes.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with all the comments so far. And the one, oh, I'm sorry. That's better. That better? Okay. I agree with my fellow commissioners. The one thing that I thought that was really wonderful was that stair, modifying the stair, that 2 feet or 1 feet, extending it made it just glorious. But all the other comments are under button.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So I think I'm in, right? I want to say that my fellow commissioners have been very thorough and thoughtful about how to deal with kind of a difficult situation just because of the issues on the site itself, many of which were not created by the applicant. And so, we have to take some of those into consideration. If we didn't have them, we might be addressing things slightly differently. But the things that we've raised to work with staff on, the the finishing of the wall, reducing the hardscape. I think are very important. And but I do want to say to the applicant that we've all been on jobs where you have to make decisions in a split second. So on the one hand, I'm a little sympathetic about that. But on the other hand, we come here, we work with you, we try to do our best to accommodate some of the issues that you have to deal with. And we really would appreciate it if you would not think of think of the fact that we're here to help you and we understand what you're saying and we're responding accordingly. So in the future, we would appreciate if you would do that. I also would like to say that I truly appreciate the research that you did and your understanding, not only now of the history of what was done there, and also your understanding the issues on your site and trying to work within the limitations that offers you, and the fact that you're a house within a neighborhood and that you have to figure out how to make everything work within the context of your neighbors as well.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I concur with the comments, all the commissioners' comment. I think that, given the climate situation and given how beautiful this historic district is, you have a lot of, this is not an area where you can afford to have a lot of impervious because your neighbors are full of septic tanks and, that. And I'm gradually detecting a trend here of, the homeowners are gradually expanding that trend by having more and more impervious. And I think this is a warning to the district, which is to say that, Mother Nature does not kid around. And when the time comes, you just look at the recent downpour everywhere you see. And so I concur with, Commissioner Ginsburg and Goldblum's observation about that we should encourage all applicants to work with the staff to try to, to minimize this trend. But I agree with the rest that the rest is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg.
So in general, I agree with the other commissioners. I'd add that being in a landmark district has pluses and minuses. And had before I was on the commission, one of the minuses, and we'd have to explain this to contractors, et cetera, is we can't make changes without review. Now, I understand the issue that as you uncovered things, there were issues of water and you had to deal with that. And as the other commissioners have said, I understand that. Some of the other changes were made just because you're out there and you wanted to change something, and that's more concerning. I compliment you on finding the original window and proposing to put that back in. I'd also say the one thing that hasn't been said is I think the original scheme with the lower parapet and a less fence was a better alternative. But I'm not sure the other commissioners agree with that. So I think with all the comments we have, it should go to staff and get resolved.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
I just want to quickly comment on what an interesting house this is. It reminds me of my days of living in Miami. This house could easily have been in Miami, including a terrible construction of stucco over wood frame, which of course in Miami is a disaster. And here it looks to be kind of a disaster as well. Not really before us, but I just thought it would be interesting to note that, because the house is a much contributing house, I think, to the district. All that said, I am somewhat sympathetic to the issue that the owner made in terms of his explanation of how things were moving along in the field quickly and during COVID. And I think it might have been hard for the owner to stop construction and restart it, get landmarks, people out there, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the infringements were so terrible that we should rip them out, make them rip it out and start over. But I think the perhaps additional landscaping along the Cinder Drive and the Hollywood Avenue fronts need to be addressed. I'm not, I was interested in Mark Ginsburg's idea about the parapet in the back. I too thought that those rails were strange without the parapet, but I'm not sure we have the votes to change that, and I'm not sure it's so egregious that we should change. Otherwise, I think the found window and the owner's enthusiasm to reinstall it indicates his general love for the house and his interest in making these restorations. I never would have approved the change to a rectangular top, to that rounded top, but I don't think, again, it's so egregious that we should force a change. So long and the short of it, I think I'm in more or less agreement with the rest of the commissioners and don't need to repeat everything else they've said.
Okay, thank you all. And thank you for your thoughtful comments on this application. There were a lot of sort of details to the siting aspects that we needed to discuss. And, I'm sure the applicant understands that it's really important when you do identify issues in the field that change, the plans, that you reach out to the staff. And it may be that for certain parts of your work, the staff can say, you can keep working on this and we'll quickly resolve this other issue. I understand you're in the middle of the work and you need to make decisions, but sometimes we can work with you around that as well. So it's always good to call and ask, because once the work happens without the benefit of our guidance, we have to look at it as if it were being approved the first time, and it may not be found appropriate. In this case, I think that the commission we have enough votes to support most of these changes, but with some continued work with the staff, and that would include looking at the finishes of the retaining wall that was pushed out and the landscaping as you perceive it, both within that area and at the front yard, including looking at reducing that front patio as was originally envisioned to kind of balance out the hardscape versus landscape. But we have support for widening the stairs and for the window and the door. So, Commissioner Goldman, would you be able to make that motion?
I just want to add one comment to see if anyone thinks it's worthwhile to add it. The pavers, given the extent of the impervious coverage, the design and texture of the pavers is probably worth looking at with staff as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So regarding 200 Hollywood Avenue, Douglaston Hill, Hills.
There is a Douglaston Hill Historic District. Yes.
There you go.
This is Douglaston. It's a mistake. This one is in Douglaston proper.
There you go then. So regarding 200 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Historic District, the application is to legalize constructing garden walls, modifying the stair, installing infill and paving in noncompliance with C of A 21-02054. An excavation without a land preservation commission permit, and to modify a parapet railing and install paving. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the work has not and will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features. That the limited excavation work and construction of the retaining walls has helped to protect the house from damage due to flooding. That the retaining wall at the east rear lot line closely aligns with the grade level of the neighboring property and is set back from the street and is only seen from limited vantage points. That the stone veneer
at the east lot line retaining wall will be in keeping with the walls found throughout the historic district in terms of materials and pattern. That the side yard patio will be modest in scale and set back from the street and will be partially screened by sloped terrain and plantings with only a low wall extending above grade level at the west front yard. That the low wall at the north side of the site will be screened by evergreen plantings and only seen from the public thoroughfares in limited views. That the simple design, form, and finish of the stucco-clad north and south and west walls will be compatible with Mediterranean revival style of the house. That the widening of the non-historic stair, installation of guardrails and posts at the roof for the extension will be compatible with the style, size, and proportions of the house. That the installation of paired doors and associated modifications to the masonry opening is harmonious with the pattern of windows, doors, and masonry openings of the house. And that the replacement of the modern window with a salvaged stained glass window will restore this historic element to the house. However, I request that recommend the applicant work with the staff to make the following modifications to the design. Number one, that they increase the amount of landscaped area, both either within the retained wall patio at the south or at the front along Center Drive. That the applicant work with the staff to review the paving material and the wall cladding material and details.
Any additional landscape?
And to generally study the landscaping to make sure that it feels contextual and appropriate.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Please continue to work closely with the staff. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 23-09082, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 144, Lot 7502, 36 Hudson Street, the Tribeca West Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival style warehouse building designed by Babcock and Morgan and built in 1891 to 1892. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Good morning, Jason Friedman from Joseph Lombardi Architects. Okay. So our office restored this building back in 2007. It's the corner of Hudson and Duane, beautiful building. And the one that we're talking about today is, as you see pointed out in the top left behind these open parapet arches that run this side of the building and on the street. Oh, okay. So you can see, actually, I can't really see, but oh, I can see on here, sorry. So you see the top left plan there is the existing 8th floor plan. That's where we're going to be doing our work in the top left corner. That's a terrace that was created back in 2007 when the building was developed. And what we're proposing is the number 3 there, proposed 8th floor plan, is that we put a new skylight wall set back 4 feet from the street wall on Hudson Street and sloped back so that the angle of the wall allows for still the sky to be shown above this proposed kind of skylight or roof addition. Now, if you go down to the bottom left corner there, you can see that's a existing roof plan. In that plan, the part that I just described on the left top of that plan is open to the sky, and there is a roof to the right side without any railings, a big skylight, some mechanical equipment. So the proposed new roof above this new skylight in that area would be in this area where there's a terrace and sloped up from the left to the right, and then at the existing roof, you'll see a line that's kind of perpendicular to the top line there, and that's the proposal of a new roof railing, which wasn't something that was considered, in fact, during the original development. I'm not sure if that's part of this public hearing in terms of approval, but it's something that's necessary to make the roof safe and finish getting a CO on the building, separate but and not connected in any way to this new penthouse. So here's the 80-foot tall building here on the left, existing. And on the right, you have, on the right top there, you have the existing facade remaining completely the same, and showing with that crosshatch in the top left, our proposed addition up there behind and sloped behind that parapet. And then if you look to the bottom right, that's kind of like a peel away showing this kind of shape, this L shape of this proposed addition behind these parapet windows. And essentially that whole plane is just sloped up to the top, just sloped. I think there's an angle on the next. So what this shows is, again, cut behind the existing parapet, we do have this these two big sliding doors that are set back 15 or so feet right now. On the right side, not part of this penthouse or not part of this 8th floor unit, is currently a sloped skylight that is very similar to what we're proposing in just its typical roof skylight design. And so on the left, we're showing how it is existing setback with these big glass doors that you can't see from the street, right across the street. And then a proposal of some sort of slanted skylight, not pitched in the same way as the existing one on the right, but also just similar in its design. All the way on the left is that existing skylight. That's a section that's taken on the south side of the building versus we're on the north side. And then there's our existing section right after it with the setback terrace and this chamfered setback. And then proposed is our skylight area there. So the black is the existing and the white is our proposal. And you can see this angle and this setback from the street wall. And then just to note that on the building, we'll go back to here. In this little area on the left side, to the left of the arrow, there's a, what was kind of like an old elevator bulkhead, but I don't think it was. It's a kind of a tower kind of part of the parapet that goes a bit higher. We're proposing that our addition goes higher there as well. And you'll see kind of the implications of that in our visibility study, very minimal, but just to clarify the difference between the two sections all the way on the right on top of each other, 3 and 4, right? That pop up where we're 13 feet versus 8'6". This is just a little bird's eye view showing the relocation of these 2 HVAC units, which are currently on the inside of the parapet wall. And then this new higher roof there on the top left of the right drawing, and this new flat roof above the slope skylight filling in the terrace area on the right drawing, on the right hand side. Okay, also part of this, and let me key you in here, where we have those condenser units on the left-hand drawing, we're moving those and hoping to make that an interior space and adding this north lot line window, a 4x6 by 5'8" double hung, fireproof window, same finish as these other windows on the left side, which you can't see from Hudson Street because the building actually goes through to West Broadway over there. And so that's part of this scope. Okay, so here's some visibility study. So the first photo is taken from Hudson Street, right there, right across Duane Park, where you can actually start to see through the parapet windows. And what you can see there on my screen, I can see it, is this the orange netting of our kind of addition on the left set of arched openings versus the right hand. The second one is just showing the view from the north, looking down Hudson Street for this proposed lot line window. Okay, so this is the long view all the way from Greenwich Street over Duane Park, where currently on the left picture you can see the existing setback penthouse with the chamfered edge and the existing neighboring skylight, albeit a lower one. So from that distance, our studies show that yes, you would still see our skylight versus, let's say, stucco and a little bit of skylight as it is now on the left picture. So that's a very long view, but it is a view, and I think it's an important one that also shows it doesn't really change the visibility much between the way it is today and the way we're proposing. Okay, so this is right, another view from Hudson Street, zoomed in but rendered, and the strategy here, as I talked about in the beginning, was how much can we slope can we slope the skylight whatever needs to be to always allow for that top inner kind of brick arch to then show sky versus a kind of a direct change to not seeing the sky. So that's the intention with the slope and the heights that we're choosing, and then this is a zoomed in view from a little bit more west on Duane Street versus that first view directly across Duane Street Park. This is from the south, again looking at some of that netting to show the visibility. And these are some really long views of the mock-up, which I think illustrate that the view through this parapet wall from these distances is not really being altered in a way that's inappropriate. From stucco to maybe more glass. Another view. Again, the mock-up views, just a lot of those. And then these are just some pictures I wanted to go through to key you into where we are. On the left, there are those condenser units I described, where that new window would go. There's that kind of raised parapet, and that's the existing roof above the 8th floor that's being stand on. And then looking south from that existing 8th floor roof, and then looking down from the 8th floor roof to the terrace that we're proposing would become more like that skylight you see on the very right picture, which is the neighboring skylight. Ours is going to be closer to ours is proposed to be closer to the parapet and sloped more, but essentially not anything really too different materiality. Something simple, and I think that's it. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I got confused on A001. And I spent a lot of time looking at the proposed roof plan. And you know where you have the crochet? And the roof,
okay.
And then you have areas that non-crochet. What is the crochet and what's
that's the rest of that 8th floor or the rest of the roof that we are not. This is just one unit on a floor that there's 2 units. So anything you see in crochet, 0 changes are being proposed. And really at the existing 8th floor roof, which is the bottom left, the proposal is to move condenser units onto that roof and provide a railing that runs south-north for safety. So, because there is no other railing there.
So the portion of that is just roof membrane, and a portion of that is glass, correct? Yeah, it's, right?
In which drawing? Which is the
Proposed roof plan. So you have the crochet, then you have a segment of the rectangle that I think is going to be glass or skylight. Then there's a portion that's just that filled L-shaped piece. What is that? That's just roof membrane?
Oh, okay, yes, it's just roof membrane, and it's not so much L, but it's thinking about it as one square of that space has a taller ceiling height because it's behind that existing parapet. And that height actually, I'm gonna just say it happens here. Because behind let me just go to here. Yeah, so again, we're all the way on the left-hand side of this building where there's that tall kind of extra parapet. So behind the parapet that has all of the openings, we're only about 9 feet tall. But behind the parapet where there are no openings, we're like 13 feet tall. So it's like one square and a rectangle that are at different heights.
Oh.
Okay, and I think you said that your strategy was that from the views close up, you look up right now, you see sky, and you've designed it so that the slope would allow you to continue to see sky.
Right.
And from the long views, which you showed us, you currently see the existing penthouse or other background elements, and you'll just see the slope of your extended penthouse. But those views that you presented are zoom views for clarity, right? Those are, the long views are.
Even the mountains are still there. It's just, Duane Street's wide and people constantly walking in that direction. So it's a view,
right.
And it's just a view that also already shows visibility of these things. So
That are already there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Gold?
Yeah, can you just take a look at that section drawing on, there you go, preview, keep on going back, it's, hold on a second, 001. A001.
Okay.
A001.
Okay.
Keep on going. There you go.
Okay.
Right. So I'm looking at the section number 6 in the top right. So it looks like there's like a glass railing that extends up from your glass sloped wall. Is that correct?
This thing.
No, that to the left of that, to the left of that, to the left of that, left, stop.
No.
No.
You know what it is? It's the line, it's like a dotted line showing the angle.
See that there? That looks like the glass wall is coming up straight.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. That's trying to indicate the wall behind the wall.
Aha.
The taller wall. It's all at the same angle.
So that's not a parapet or anything.
No.
That's just
So
back there.
So like the plane that we're trying to set, it goes all the way from the bottom.
It steps up with the parapet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that it's 13 feet tall. It is also on the left side. It also has that same angle as the parapet.
And at the bottom of that little gully that you're making, that gutter between the back of the parapet wall and face of your new angled glass wall, how big is that space?
At the smallest one, it's 1 foot.
At the smallest, it's a foot. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, we don't have any other questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in this room who wishes to speak on this item? All right, not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any signups beforehand for this item. And looking through the attendees list, I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval, and I'll bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Commissioners, any final questions for the applicant? No. Okay, so why don't we move to close the hearing and begin our discussion? Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Second. Thank you. Close it. Okay, and Commissioner Chen, would you second it?
Second.
Sorry, that's okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this penthouse that is designed. It's an extension pulling forward an existing penthouse behind a parapet with arched openings in it. And the applicant has presented views showing the strategy that it's sloped to from the close-up views to retain where you see sky to retain views of the sky, and from the long views where you see existing penthouse or other material behind those arches, you'd see the new penthouse. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start?
Sure. I think this is an appropriate submission. I think moving the glass wall closer to the parapet will be minimally visible, mostly from long distances, and still should retain the visibility of sky when viewed from the street, looking up through those arched openings. So I don't have any comments. I think it's fine.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson.
The rooftop enclosing a terrace space is appropriate. The enclosure is minimally visible, therefore not an issue. The mechanical unit are not visible. Lot line windows 2/2 are appropriate. Safety railing to separate the mechanical space and meet code requirements is also appropriate.
Okay, thank you for mentioning the lot line window as well. Commissioner Lefty.
I agree. I think I agree about the comments about the visibility, the lot line windows. I think it's really well done. And you did a good job trying to keep it minimal and keep it within the surrounding context so it doesn't really stick out in any way, other than how it does and did when the area was initially designated.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chen.
Well, I agree. This is minimally visible, and I'm glad Commissioner Jefferson mentioned about the lot line window.
Great, thanks. All right, and Vice Chair Bland?
Agreed. I think it's an ingenious way of adding additional square footage to this apartment, and it's certainly approvable.
Okay, great. So, yes, Commissioner Ginsburg, I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. I agree with my fellow commissioners. It's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make the motion? Thanks. Did I skip you as well? I'm so sorry, Commissioner.
Happy to be skipped.
Sorry about that.
See, since you didn't skip me, I will just add a couple of technical things. First of all, that gutter being really close to the parapet is a big mistake, because on a rain like we had yesterday, you'll have water gushing out of those arches. So they should look technically as to how to detail that gutter so that it doesn't have a problem. And I would just say they might want to explore with staff the notion of non-reflective glass, because the only issue you're going to get out of this is reflections.
Great, both excellent points. Thank you for adding them. Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
In the matter of LPC 23-09082, 36 Hudson Street in the Tribeca West Historic District. A Romanesque revival style warehouse building designed by Babcock and Morgan, built in 1891, 1892. Application is to construct a rooftop addition. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the construction of the proposed rooftop addition will not obscure, damage, or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the addition will only be minimally visible through the arcaded parapet in conjunction with existing rooftop additions previously approved at the building. that the simple design of the minimally visible rooftop addition with large glazed openings will be in keeping with modern rooftop additions found elsewhere within the Tribeca West Historic District, that the proposed lot line window will match the configuration of other lot line windows, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district. But we recommend that the applicant work with staff to look at the gutter detail to make sure that is adequately taken into consideration for drainage, and to consider non-reflective glass on the glazing to avoid reflections.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next item.
Okay, the next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 23, LPC 23-11611, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 627, lot 1, 829 Greenwich Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a modern building designed by Matthew Baird and constructed pursuant to C of A 03-7041, issued on May 15th, 2003. The application is to alter the facades and construct rooftop structures and other elements.
Morning, commissioners. My name is Jonathan Taylor. I'm with Higgins Craze Work Partners, Preservation Consultants. And I'm here. I'm joined by Alex Barker of Barker Associates Architecture Office, as well as Jen Young, the homeowner. We're here to present modifications to 829 Greenwich Street, which is a townhouse approved by the commission in 2003. This project was conceived in response to building performance issues and habitability issues that stem from the original design. And the proposal layers responses to these issues onto the approved design in a manner that's consistent with the way that many buildings in Greenwich Village Historic District have evolved over time. The house is located between Horatio and Gansevoort Streets in the district's near the district's northern boundary with the Gansevoort Market Historic District. Some views of the house on Greenwich Street. The street facade is composed of a large steel plate that is set asymmetrically forward of a curtain wall windows that run up each side of the facade. The south side facade is partially visible with a large angled skylight, as well as a red brick chimney, a feature and a material that nod to the historic architecture of Greenwich Village. The rear facade is largely composed of a large window wall, and there's a non-visible rear yard with basement skylights, and repair and replacement of those have been approved at staff level. Just a couple of views on the roof of the large skylight, front and back, the chimney. Alex is going to describe the proposal in detail, but I just wanted to show a few overall images before briefly discussing some history and context. At the street facade, the proposal entails introducing larger new window openings that intersect with both the steel plate and the setback facade, as well as cladding the setback facade in brick with window openings along the north side. And I want to just note that it's a central premise of the project to retain the steel plate, both for sustainability reasons and also to work with it as a central feature of the existing design. And Alex will discuss that in a little bit further detail. Some views, rendered views from the street. At the roof, it's proposed to replace the large angled skylight with an angled solar canopy, as well as a small greenhouse at the southeast corner of the roof. These were originally, when we presented to the community board, these were finished in black. And in response to community board comments about the visual presence of these, the design was changed to a gray to match the side facade of the building. And at the rear, it's proposed to replace the window wall with a stucco clad facade with punched window openings. A brief history of the site. 829 Greenwich was originally the site of a mid-19th century roadhouse. By the 20th century, it had been extensively altered for industrial uses, as you can see in the tax photo, with very large openings. By designation of the district in 1969, it was described as completely stuccoed over. And in 2003, the commission approved the replacement of the deteriorated shell with the current house. And this approval is an example of the way the commission has embraced new design that plays on the materials, variety of materials and building types of the district and the history of evolution in the district. And this history also informs the proposal today. Just a few examples of the way that the district's earliest buildings have visibly evolved over time. Examples include dramatic interventions like studio skylights, removal of stoops, and reconfiguration of entries that create new arrangements and shapes of windows and doors, combination of row houses into apartment buildings, like the example on the right, like Ratio Street, where you could still read the townhouses, but they're also combined into an apartment building. And things like the ground floor, you have the original window openings with straight lintels with arched openings underneath them. So these changes create a visible layer added to the historic facades that can be recognized as contributing to the character of the historic district. In addition, the course of the district's history has brought additional variety to the streetscape through newer architectural styles like the Romanesque Revival buildings, houses on the left, new building types like tenements, often with exuberant ornament, and in the early 20th century, complete redesigns of historic house facades in new eclectic styles. Additionally, particularly in the far west village, the presence of industrial buildings further adds to the variety of the streetscape. Particular industrial uses dictated specific facade configurations, often with very large or irregular window openings. And these characteristics of the district have been embraced by the commission in approving new and significantly altered buildings. These are just a few examples of the way that layering and depth, and the variety of sizes and shapes of openings and sculptural forms in the district have been interpreted and approved new designs. And I'll turn it over to Alex to present the proposal.
Hi, thank you. I'm Alexandra Barker Architecture Office. So we'll begin with discussing how the project began. The project began soon after the clients, who are a family of four, moved into the house. They started to experience recurring respiratory illnesses. And there were investigations into the cause that eventually led them to take a look at the house, where they discovered dangerous levels of mold growth, leading them to have to evacuate. They hired a building envelope engineer who inspected the house and determined that there were a number of egregious water and thermal protection issues in the building envelope, including excessive water leakage at all roof surfaces, excessive solar heat gain at the skylight, water leakage and thermal bridging at the front and back curtain walls, which had failed gaskets and mechanical failures that led some of the units to be inoperable. Water leakage and thermal bridging at the steel plate, which had been installed with no thermal protection. In some places, the steel was actually visible from the inside. Separately, we conducted an analysis of the existing facade and discovered that the front windows did not meet the minimum light requirements for the interior bedroom spaces. We further found that although the windows technically met minimum ventilation requirements, their configuration did not allow adequate airflow. Finally, in the time they were living in the house, the owners found that transient individuals would frequently set up temporary residences at their front door under the deep recesses at the ground level, creating an unsafe condition. These discoveries led them to reconsider the design of the entire building envelope with several key considerations. They needed to create a sound and durable layer of thermal and moisture protection. They needed to increase light and ventilation. They wanted to go beyond the minimum light and air requirements, which represent an outdated benchmark and which is not typical of the district. They wanted to redistribute the location of windows in order to open up the facade in areas where light is needed and close areas where there was excessive heat gain. They also wanted to find environmentally conscious ways to make these updates and decided to incorporate passive house detailing into the redesign of the envelope. Looking closer at our analysis of the existing facade, we determined that the bedrooms at the front on the top 2 floors did not meet the minimum legal requirements for natural light. While the area of operability technically meets the minimum requirements, limiters are necessary due to the positioning of the windows near the floor, and so the windows are only able to open 4 inches. The recessing of the windows behind the plane of the plate, the steel plate, and the adjacent buildings also contributes to limiting airflow. You can see that the size of the covered exterior space is an inviting place for individuals to occupy, creating a hazardous condition. Moving on to the design proposal. Our inspiration for the approach to the facade comes from architects who have taken innovative approaches to additions and alterations to existing historic structures. The characteristic that they have in common is a way that they all have hybridized the existing and the new in a way that breaks down hierarchies and creates an ambiguity between the original and altered conditions, putting them in a dialogue that doesn't privilege one condition over the other, but allows them to coexist equally. In Carlo Scarpa's renovation of the Castle Vecchio in Verona, Italy, his approach was to preserve the existing conditions where possible. He inserted new apertures into the existing facade with different proportions and materials that made alignments with some existing conditions, but also had their own rhythms. Herzog and Nimmermann altered an existing power plant in Madrid to become the Caixa Forum. The architects preserved the facade, but altered it in unexpected ways, like replacing the material at the base, that was granite, with glass, and adding new apertures to the existing brick facade where the original windows are enclosed, using new, more irregular rhythms, scales, and proportions. In Diller's, Scafidio, and Renfro's renovation of the Juilliard School in Manhattan, their strategy included superimposing a new order of apertures while maintaining the rhythm of the original windows as impressions in the facade, hybridizing old and new facade elements. They also imposed a new angular geometry on the existing rectilinear facade. Local inspiration comes from the following reference projects that Jonathan already introduced. In 48 to 50 Charles Street, the studio windows are inserted into the existing brick facade. They have a considerably larger scale than the townhouse windows. They align selectively with existing apertures, but the new window breaks the existing cornice line. At 114 Waverly Place, the facade was comprehensively redesigned, resulting in a mix of profiles and scales in the windows on the facade, as well as differing alignments. However, the overall distribution of openings harmonizes with typical window openings in the historic district. At 70 Horatio Street, which is visible from the project we are presenting, windows and apertures openings are hybrid groups of curved and orthogonal profiles, and the facade is layered in different planes that merge into a single layer. We did a comparison of the existing and proposed facades. In the existing facade, the steel plate was designed to abstractly match the proportions of a townhouse. It was designed to float independently in front of the glass curtain wall and supporting concrete column and beam. The plate makes no alignments with the curtain wall and concrete structure behind it. The layers are absolutely clear and distinct. Materials were in high contrast to immediate context at the time of LPC approval. Brick material was limited to the chimney. In our proposed facade, the curtain wall is replaced with brick, which is a material that is dominant in the residential buildings in the district. The new and large windows have a number of characteristics. They're punched openings, positioned to be centered within this interior spaces, which is more typical for townhouse window configurations. Their scales progress from largest at the parlor level to smaller at the upper floors. They make alignments that are independent of the steel plate, but are in alignment with each other, playing off of the floating nature of the steel plate. The windows have divisions that further break down their scale and provide ventilation. The mix of curved and square corners creates an ambiguity between existing and new conditions, creating a hybrid condition where existing and proposed can coexist in balance. And another point to make about the shaping of these windows, the curved corner reads more of a subtraction in our opinion, where the square corner creates more of an ambiguity. But in terms of actual technical execution, it's easier to cut the curved corner out of the steel plate than to create a perfect 90-degree corner. So we thought it was interesting to try to have that interplay between the shapes in terms of how it might read as an insertion into the existing or something that was pre-existing the steel plate. We are still maintaining the distinct layers, and so the windows are inserted in a plane that's behind the steel, but in front of the brick. Finally, from a performance standpoint, we are proposing to eliminate facade systems that are at the end of their lifespan with ones that greatly improve thermal performance, air and water tightness, and provide long-term durability. We are proposing window openings that exceed minimum requirements for light and air. The sizing of windows is in alignment with the range of window sizes found in the district. Finally, we are choosing materials and systems that align with passive house requirements. Now I'll talk more about that later. Here's some street views showing the proposed materials and apertures from approach angles. Here again is a comparison of existing and proposed facades, this time from street view. This aerial view shows the proposed replacement of the skylight with a bulkhead, solar array, and greenhouse. This view from the rear shows a proposed solar array. The shift to electric fuel is part of an effort to align with passive house standards, which are based on electrical sources of energy. The building is also designed with a tight thermal envelope that will dramatically reduce heating and cooling loads. Here we are identifying the materials we are proposing for the front facade. All materials aside from the steel plate need to be replaced due to deterioration. Replacing the curtain wall with brick will improve the thermal performance and harmonize with the context of the surrounding structures. We are also proposing that window frames be made of aluminum rather than steel due to their superior thermal capabilities. So we did extensive research on what materials and systems would work with passive house detailing. So we had to switch to aluminum from steel. It was important to the client and the design team finally to preserve this steel plate. Considerable amount of cost and energy was involved in installing it, and removing it would also add considerable cost. The team decided to work with it as an existing condition. At the rear facade, we're replacing the curtain wall with a stucco wall and punched openings that will also improve thermal capabilities. Here's a detail of the proposed new window. The material choices were made again to improve thermal properties and eliminate the potential for water penetration. The facade design here incorporates detailing for passive house requirements, including increased insulation, membranes to steel material transitions, and triple glazed windows that minimize air and moisture leakage through the building envelope. Here you can see that the edge of the steel plate is still visible and in a different plane from the window. In these wall sections, you can see we are adding continuous insulation and a fire barrier behind the steel plate. These details of the facade and plan show the existing and proposed conditions. In the proposed, the added insulation now continues across the entire facade, behind the steel plate, the aluminum capping, and the brick, where there was no insulation before. In this detail, you can again see the new window located behind the plane with the steel plate. These sections show the existing proposed relationship between the building envelope and the covered exterior space at the entrance level. In the proposed, we are moving the plane of the building at grade forward to minimize the area of covered space outside. But we are still preserving the setback from the primary facade. The existing conditions of the roof are here. In the proposed roof configurations, we are replacing the large skylight bulkhead with a smaller bulkhead for the stair and a solar array that covers the exterior space. And at the rear of the roof, we are proposing a small vertical extension that would be used as a greenhouse. Here, the changes of the roof are shown in plan, showing the new bulkhead and solar array. Street views show how the exposure of the changes at the roof. You can see these are from the intersection of Horatio and Greenwich. Here's a view of the mock-up on the left and the rendering on the right, showing the changes with the proposed roof. And the second set of views further down Greenwich, showing the mock-up on the left and the proposed roof on the right. And the proposed changes to the south facade include an additional lot line window, which you can see there's minimal visibility of from the streets. Finally, here we are detailing the proposed changes that are following passive house standards. Generally speaking, passive house structures are designed with an airtight building envelope with maximized insulation to reduce heating and cooling loads. They're detailed with continuous membranes that minimize air leakage. They're powered by electricity. In the proposal, the solar array generates electricity to power the building, The building envelope becomes thicker to accommodate insulation and thermal membranes. All windows will have triple glazing for added thermal performance. Mechanical air circulation will allow filtered air to move between inside and outside during the times of the year when natural ventilation isn't desired. Finally, gas service is removed and replaced with electric equipment in accordance with local law 154. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? Commissioner Ginsburg?
You're talking a lot about passive house detail. Are you planning to get the building passive house certified?
I think it's not possible for it to be passive house certified because of the existing conditions, it being a sort of existing attached townhouse. So, yeah, not certified.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Lutfi.
Just along those lines, I'm assuming the building is going to meet the new local law 97 standard.
Yes, okay, absolutely.
All right, any other questions?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions at this.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Bland, please go ahead.
I'm wondering about the visibility of the rear facade changes.
They are not visible from the street. In fact, to make that aerial photo, it was pretty challenging.
Okay.
There's no way to get that view.
Not visible. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
not
you.
visible.
Mhm.
All right, any others? Okay, let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? And I don't see anyone in the room, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups in advance for this item. The first we'll be hearing from is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal to be inappropriate. We believe that the front facade of this building is a carefully considered composition by a significant architect working to negotiate the language of 2 distinct historic districts, one residential and one industrial. Beyond that, the facade is extremely modest and differential to its neighbors. HDC believes that there may be ways to alter this building and this facade that are more sympathetic to the original architect's intent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lionel Stevens. Lionel Stevens, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Okay. And once you are there, could you please unmute your line and state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good day, Commissioners. Thank you so much. My name is Lynell Stevens, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village Preservation, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify. The proposal for the primary facade of this building is completely inappropriate. Current facade is a unique modern iteration at the border of the Greenwich Village and Gansevoort Market historic districts, which suits the transition between the two quite well. The proposed fenestration, on the other hand, is not appropriate to either district and does not serve as an appropriate bridge between the two, nor is there any precedent for such a facade anywhere nearby. The proposed windows lend a hodgepodge appearance to the previously elegant and austere Corten steel plate. We understand that the current curtain wall conditions on either side do not provide enough window coverage to meet code requirements for the bedroom, but a different design that draws reference from the neighborhood must be put forth. Perhaps the architects can rethink the building's program and consider moving the bedrooms to the rear, finding a way to both meet code and respect the concept of the original design, not obliterate it with oddly shaped punched openings. As proposed, the windows look completely out of place next to the adjacent federal-style row house and turn a unique and atypical facade, which was a thoughtful modern interpretation of a townhouse, to a very problematic and ungainly one. Regarding the visibility of the rooftop pergola, solar panels, and greenhouse, visibility could be mitigated by a reduction in massing and/or by lightening the finish color of the rooftop structure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from the Victorian Society in New York. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We would not normally comment on changes to a building constructed pursuant to a permit issued in 2003. We'll make an exception here, as the proposed changes to the street facade seem designed in a vacuum, without any reference to the character of this street or this district, and without any apparent respect for the design integrity of a building reviewed and approved by this commission. The applicants have walked around photographing a scattering of unusual architectural details, but haven't presented a cohesive argument explaining how their design is appropriate in this location. We would have no problem with a more subtle addition of windows to this minimalist facade. There's no loss of historic material, and window facades are the norm in every historic district. But these windows are textbook examples of architectural elements designed to scream, "Look at me!" They aren't respectful of the overall character of the original building, or the Greenwich Village Historic District, or the Gansevoort Market Historic District. On board 22, the applicant notes that the steel plate was designed to match the proportion of a townhouse facade. We strongly urge that they go back and study the way rectangular, punched window openings are used on historic row house facades. They let light into dim rooms. They are unobtrusive. And their use here in conjunction with the vertical strip windows already in place would be a simple solution, vastly more in keeping with the minimalist character of the original design. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. We do not appear to have any further hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the rear facade curtain wall, lot line window, and alterations to the entry and the garage door placement. Denial of the front facade windows as eccentric and not in keeping with the building and having no reference to either the historic neighborhood or the adjacent industrial district. Approval of the canopy provided that the supports are given a more substantial appearance and that it is lighter in color, and approval of a greenhouse provided that it is lighter in color and less assertive as a highly visible element. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. I'd like to ask the applicants if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Yeah. One thing I want to speak to briefly about the rooftop materials in terms of their, in commenting on the sides, I think one piece of testimony referred to as a pergola. So I want to reiterate that it is a solar canopy, not just a covering, and so it has a purpose at its size and shape. I think briefly on the topic of the windows, and maybe Alex wants to speak a little bit more about again, about the design and the alignment. I think the comment about moving bedrooms to the rear was maybe a little bit illuminating in terms of what's driving what here. I think that having punched openings, and these are obviously, some of them are larger than, very typical windows or kind of exuberant. But having punched openings that are legible as windows into rooms in a residence is not a very inappropriate thing for this district. And that's the main thing I wanted to say about that, I think. And Alex, do you want to speak a little more to the windows?
I think what I would say about the existing facade is, my impression of it is the opposite of retiring. I mean, it's a single steel plate that is extremely dominant and really, I think, has more of doesn't have a sort of residential character. I mean, I completely support it being a product of its time, and in its time, that was sort of like definitely an approach that people were making. But I think that today's time is more about being acknowledging human comfort. And I just think that facade as it stands now was sort of not doing that. I think it was sort of
putting human comfort toward the back seat, as evidenced by the portions of the side windows. So basically, the other thing I would say is there's absolutely no way around not putting more windows in the front facade. It's impossible because this isn't a giant house. If it's going to be used for bedrooms, some bedrooms have to be in the front. If we replace those curtain walls with aluminum, which we pretty much have to, because those steel ones were custom and they failed, and it's kind of a giant expense to go through that process of replacing them with the steel. The aluminum ones have wider frames, so then it would reduce the glass so much that it would look ridiculous. It would be like 50% frame and 50% glass. So it's just not really practical to go that route. And as we've already said, there's not enough light and air there, so there would have to be some proposal for opening up that facade. In terms of it relating to the district, the level of abstraction that the plate was, providing in terms of its relation to the district, to me, isn't any more of an argument for a relationship than what we're proposing, where we're making larger scale windows for sure. They're a little bit more on the scale of some of those later interventions, like the skylight windows and the studio windows. And some of those other modifications that I pointed to. But I think that the general alignment and the sort of hierarchy of the sort of room spaces versus the sort of secondary space in the facade is in keeping with kind of traditional townhouse configurations. I think that's all I can say about it.
Okay. Any final questions, commissioners? Yes, please go ahead. Just state your name for the record before you speak.
Sure. Okay, hi, I'm the owner. I'm Jenny Young. I just wanted to just reiterate a little bit that we had bought this house. We moved in with our family of 4, and then we all started to get really sick. And so my son started to get a bloody nose every day. And then we had guests come in, and they were waking up and they couldn't really open their eyes from the mold. So we moved into this house thinking like, wow, this is a really cool place. We're going to move in. It's going to be like our family home. We got so sick that we had to emergency evacuate out of the house and move all of our possessions. And we, we're like in transient living for 9 months while we were trying to figure out what to do. And so, although this house is interesting looking, it's not a great home for a family because there isn't enough light, there isn't enough air, and it's making people sick. So that skylight on the top was like keeping the house hot. As you would walk up to the top floor, it was like maybe you would go up 10 to 15 degrees because of that solar gain. And then the fact that there are no windows in the bedrooms. And as Alex mentioned, it's actually not a huge house. And in order to have enough bedrooms, you kind of have to put them in the front of the house because there isn't enough space between the back of that little townhouse and where our house is. The windows don't open. And so the air, and when we got it, we're like, wow, this is really cool. It's like a little cave. And then what you don't realize is it's a cave that encloses mold that makes your whole family sick. So punching these holes in these front things is important because I don't want my family, I don't want them to be sick anymore. So that is kind of the reason why we're putting holes in this plate. And as we were doing this, we were realizing, wow, this house really is an energy sucker. And so we were trying to figure out how can we make it more efficient and not really just so wasteful of energy. And so that solar, that metal plate has no insulation, and you could touch the back of the plate in the living room. It was, all the way to floor to ceiling, huge hole. So it's just a crazy heat sink, and all of that heat and all of that cool is just coming through this building. And so we're really trying to focus on how can we make this house a livable home and not just be such an intense energy drain. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any final questions? All right, let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. This will be an interesting discussion. This is a commission-approved building at the edge of the Greenwich Village Historic District, bordering on the Gansevoort Market Historic District. And I remember when the commission originally approved this building, it was thought to be a very interesting design for a very altered site that reflected the industrial character at the west end of the village as you transitioned into Gansevoort Market. We approved it. So it's sort of interesting to see how it's evolved over time and its lifespan. But what I would say before we begin our discussion is that commission-approved buildings have not historically been treated as contributing buildings. We found this design to be appropriate. It doesn't mean that we can't find another design to be appropriate. So we found this design to be appropriate within the context of this historic district and the neighboring historic district. And so we should evaluate the changes in that same way, whether or not the resulting design has a relationship to the historic district, detracts from the historic district, complements the historic district. And, to the extent that the sort of design intent also has a relationship to the district. Of course, we can comment on the effect of the changes on the original design intent, but it should really be about its relationship to its context. So we'll begin our discussion. Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
Thank you. I will. What an interesting issue we have before us. So I think I don't recall this building being landmarked when it was, but it must have been a bit of a cause célèbre at the time. And I think rightfully so. To me, the original design, although incredibly problematic, as we've been hearing, was at least visually, and I'm speaking now only of the front facade, was a complete and whole work of art, you might say. It was internally consistent. Did it relate to the two districts that it's been suggested it was part of? I suppose, but rather abstractly, to say the least. To me, it was just an interesting piece of good design, if you will. But now that we know about its life, it's been a very poor building to live in. And I understand the need to make these changes. But I think the changes that have been suggested in the front are off base. But I do, and I want to say this right up front, I think the changes in the back are fine. It's not visible from any street. Therefore, it's pretty wide open to what can happen back there. And if this is what the owner and the architect want, I have no problem with it. Likewise, I have no problem with the issues on the roof. Those are fine with me as well. But I do think that the front has to be rethought. And I think there are two ways by which maybe the architect can rethink this. One is to start over. Literally, don't try to tinker with the steel plate, et cetera, et cetera. Just remove the whole front and start over with a new facade. And there are any number of ways that can be done, and we see it all the time. And there's a great variety from aping the nearby neighbors' federal punched openings to something as wide open and abstract as this, but more workable. So a start over. The second, if for some reason that the steel plate needs to stay, and it was suggested it needed to stay for cost reasons, but having a hard time understanding that. But if for some reason it needs to stay or they want to keep it, I think these willful, frivolous windows are wrong. And and it may be some sort of a ribbon system. I'm not sure if it would be vertical or horizontal, but without curves and the rest of the kind of flamboyance that is being suggested here might be appropriate to cut into the I think it's core 10. Anyway, I'll leave it at that and let others weigh in, and we'll see where we are. But those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Letfi. Fred, I can't believe you're not sitting next to me because I don't know, we're like thinking in a similar way here. So, and maybe that's why we sit next to each other sometimes.
I can tell you we're about 900 miles removed today.
So first, I want to say how unbelievably sympathetic I am to the really horror story that you and your family have had to endure. As you said, you move into a place, you think it's cool, it's in a cool neighborhood, and you have no idea that, you know, there's all of this water leakage and that there's excessive heat gain and that there's mold and it's getting you sick. Mold is the absolute worst thing to have to deal with from a health perspective. And of course, I'm a big light person, so not 100%. While I think the design is very on the front facade is, you know, really interesting and definitely of its time. And although it's austere, it is kind of quiet. And then the back opens up, and I guess there was this sense that all the light's coming from the back. But, you know from your living experience what that situation was. So I completely understand the need to get light in from the front as well. That's my point. And to secure this, you know, the skin of this building and the whole idea of moving toward a passive house, even if you cannot actually get the official certification for whatever reason, is admirable. This is the way of the world. And also the goal of putting solar as part of it on the roof is terrific. So all that said, I really feel like Fred hit the nail on the head. I mean, on the one hand, so in the attempt to put more windows on the facade, I think somehow you've compromised the design and integrity of what was there, even if it's not a landmark. And it doesn't fit in with what's around it, and it's kind of looks like I think you're doing yourself and the surrounding a disservice, because not only does it not fit now, I think it's never going to fit. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. Okay, so I moved to a good place. So I think number one, if you feel the need to keep the steel, then I feel like the pattern on the cutouts has to be more regularized and somehow look to what's around you so that it enhances what exists, and it enhances, its place within the surrounding. So that's important. However, I don't know when you have to keep that unless it's for monetary reasons. I think you're restricting yourself.
you have an amazing, you're obviously spending considerable investments in this building as it is. And you have an opportunity to make it your own in a way that works with the site and again, works with the surrounding and doesn't have all these windows that I just don't know where they came from. They came from some, open buildings somewhere surrounding.
Yeah. And then, even though, the back is not visible, I don't think that you can change the front and not change the back. I don't think the back works either. In fact, the back of the house was very good looking, very, very attractive. And I was sorry to see it go, but I can certainly appreciate, I'm going to continue to move back. I can certainly appreciate that you might need to think about how to reconfigure the interior, and you might need some walls there and less glazing. So, I'm just going to leave it at that because I think you get the message.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
This is a very interesting proposition for me because there are three elements. There's the element on the roof, there's the back, there's front. The back language is different from the language of the front. And then there's this issue of minimalism that's existing. And when I thought this last night, I said, why not just get rid of the metal? Get rid of the whole thing. But they decided to keep it. And then they decided to say, okay, we're going to keep it and we're going to add elements to it. And I'm not talking about the function of the space, and I'm not talking about the habitability of it or any of those issues. I'm just talking about the volume of it. And then they proceed to put the windows in, and it takes up, 75% of the metal panel or more. So they like the metal panel. And then by putting all those windows in, it takes away from the minimalism that was the power of the first one, right? The simple elements of a metal panel with a post sticking up. Everybody loved that. So that's pretty much gone. The curbs are frivolous, I think. I don't see why curbs, but the architect wants to put curbs in. But I don't understand you're keeping the panel and then you're having the panel overlap. You're having the windows overlap the panel. So you're adding a third thing. You're adding overlapping to this that wasn't as pronounced before. So it gets a little confusing to me. I don't know how to. It will take some time to resolve that issue. The back, I think, is fine. To put a bay window in, or that works well. The roof, the addition to the roof, I think the greenhouse, though. I think what they did with what was the visibility of what's there is reduced by this new element that they're putting. I agree, and it works well. But the greenhouse portion of it then adds another element to it that makes it, whatever was reduced is being added again. So I'm not quite sure what are we getting from that. And I think it's really beautiful the way they added this roofing with the photovoltaic system. I think it's elegant, works well. So those are my comments. I think the language should be either the front facade is the most difficult one, and you have to come to some kind of conceptual idea what they want to do with that. Keep it, make it dominant, remove it or just soften it up,
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Holford Smith.
This is very interesting. I mean, I live not too far from here, and I've always considered this to be one of the most iconic buildings in this neighborhood. So I would be very sad to see that steel plate go. But I think I appreciate having to bring the building up to modern standards and light and air. I'm hoping that they can find a way to do that within the context of the existing architecture. I think that the windows that they've added really, they don't speak to the original architecture at all. And I think that they kind of fight it. So I'd rather see the steel plate go than try to do something like this. Something that they could do something more minimal within the confines of the steel plate and the existing design. I think the rooftop additions are fine. I think that the rear needs to speak to the front, so that I'm sure they'd want to redesign that to make sure it goes with the front architecture. But I would encourage them to keep the glazing at the sides of the steel plate. I think moving the door, the garage door closer to the front is fine. But I'm hoping they can find a solution that will maintain that steel plate and just work within it to provide the needed light and air.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. Can you go back to the historic photos sheet? Thanks. No, it was 1980s, 1940s. There you go. Thanks. So what made this, I agree with Brett and what many other people have said. And I too love this design, and that's certainly biasing my view. But I agree that you can either trash it or work with it or modify it, but you got to somehow have an approach that talks to the neighborhood and the district. And I think that the incursion of the facade elements as shown are aggressively non-engaging with the neighborhood. They don't share the rhythm of either left or right. They don't reference left or right. I mean, the danger, part of the references that were used was the Carlos Scarpa. Carlos Scarpa is a dangerous guy because it's so hard to be Carlos Scarpa, and everybody wants to be Carlos Scarpa. And the problem is that there was only one Carlos Scarpa and everybody else is playing with fire. And I think that this lacks the balance and elegance of mixing historic and new. And also, he and the other examples that you dealt with the exception of Lincoln Center, were very historic buildings into which a very modern thing was inserted in a very delicate proportional way. You're inserting a very kind of postmodern kind of aesthetic within a very minimalist modern. It's like the mix isn't right. This is all about minimalism, like Everardo said. And for me, the thing that works about this from a historic perspective is the comparison of the 2003 shot and the current shot. The fact that this is a kind of an odd commentary on what it was for so long, which is a void in the district. And the minimalism kind of artified the void. Nobody should ever have to live with mold. Nobody should ever have to live with an unsanitary, uninsulated house. But as any Frank Lloyd Wright homeowner knows, there's no need to chuck the baby with the bathwater. If they wanted to keep the design, they certainly could, and have it to be perfectly energy efficient, have it to be perfectly ventilated and have bigger windows and all that stuff. But the building I think of that's very similar to this, that has plenty of light and air that we approved, is 22 Bond Street, which is a new building that has a monolithic, minimalist, multi-story facade of about the same scale that happens to be perforated instead of solid steel. But the effect is the same. So if you wanted to keep the minimalism and have your added light and air, think about ways to perforate this metal skin that would maintain its monolithic, scaleless quality while allowing you to have additional fenestration behind it. So that's one option. Another option is, as others have said, is to fenestrate it in a different way. But the fenestration that you're going to mess with it has to somehow talk to the district. Right? This talks to the district by being absolutely silent. You're talking to the district by speaking another language. That doesn't work. You got to talk to the district in a way that works. I think that the modifications at the lower level could be successful. I think that the rooftop stuff is fine. I think that the rear yard, for me, feels similarly aggressive, and I'd want to look at, I mean, I'm thinking about other new buildings that we have put into Tribeca, NoHo kind of districts where there's limited rear access. My recollection is that the majority of them, even when they were new buildings, shared the vocabulary of rear yard facades in those districts with a relatively regularized facade that would at least feel complementary to the rest of the rear courtyards on which they are seen. This is so limitedly visible, maybe it's okay, but I don't know, the aggressiveness of that design that just seems so kind of out of style, even, you know, right now, it just feels to me, I don't know, out of our pattern, let's put it that way.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I understand the issues you have, and I appreciate you making the building much more energy efficient and all electric. I have no issues with the rooftop. The solar is really nicely integrated. I think the rear facade could be calmer. I like what was there originally, but that's less important. I want to just talk a bit about the front facade and basically adding on to what many of my fellow commissioners have said. You do have two choices. I hope you keep the steel because I like the minimalist design that's there now. I understand one needs more windows, but I think what one needs to think about is the facade is two planes, the back, which is now the glass, and then the steel on the front. And the proposed design breaks the planes. I mean, I prefer keeping it metal and glass at the rear, but if one went to brick, I think that could work. But the windows that stick past the steel really destroy the plane. And I think, as the other commissioners said, regularized windows that are not calling attention to themselves, but are within the steel plate, and the steel plate frames everything, could work very well. Yeah. And so with that, I just think the curves and the irregularity of it and randomness of it just doesn't work.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen.
Very interesting discussion. I think this is one of the very few times I'm going to take the minority view. I think obviously this is a legacy product that the commission has created. This is an oddity because Portland steel is a very unusual material. And to me, it reminds me of Space 2001, where all of a sudden you have a monolith. And out of the monolith, you try to squeeze a family in there. Clearly, you cannot live in that thing. So as Vice Chair Threadland said correctly, there are only a couple of options. One is that you throw this into environmental waste and contribute to the landfill, or you have to perforate the skin. And to me, you know, the oddity would be here of doing a double hung windows, right? I mean, it's like to regularize it and to make it rectangular. So to me, you know, this reminds me of an art painting. This is of an abstract representation of what do you do with a piece of metal, a very unusual metal. And it's an abstract pattern. It's an abstract piece of art. that what the commission likes so much about its original use, but clearly it cannot be used. So, and I think the commission's, it's actually leaving up to the applicant, question is whether you want to discuss the steel and start over, or it's a matter of preparation now. It's basically how do you puncture it, and so that you have light and ventilation, and with adequate thermal insulation, and that can make it livable for this family that unfortunately inherited this legacy. So that's my comment.
Okay, great. Thank you all commissioners for your always thoughtful comments, and I think that they, we really thought through what the options are here for the owner. I think all very sympathetic of the situation you've been in and appreciate that. But I do think that the discordance that's created between the fenestration and the existing design undermines the kind of holistic design and that had a relationship to the district, albeit abstract. And so I think, as we've discussed, they're sort of starting anew and doing something else that is your own design, your own building that fits within the district, or working with the existing steel, which, as we said, the commission thought this was a very exciting design at the time. So if you want to work with it, I think you need to think about how it's perforated in a way that keeps it a whole design, so that that wholeness has a relationship to the kind of whole integrity of the historic buildings in the district, if that makes sense. So we'll take no action today, and we'll ask you to continue to work on it, think about the comments, and we'll let you come back as soon as you're ready. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item.
We'll now move to public hearing item number 5, LPC 23-09823, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 532, Lot 15, 661 to 665 Broadway, aka 228 to 232 Mercer Street in the NoHo Historic District. This is a French Renaissance Revival style store building designed by Brunner and Tryon and built in 1891 to 92. And also a neo-Gothic style store and loft building designed by Hugo Kaler and built in 1811 to 12. And the application is to replace storefronts.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for being here to listen to us on this August Tuesday. My name is Mary Diericks, and I'm the preservation consultant for this project. Presenting with me is Michael Carlton from Carlton Architecture. This is 665 Broadway and 240 Mercer in NoHo. The two buildings run from Broadway to Mercer Street. Since we're looking at it here on Google Earth, there's a grade change from all of Broadway to all of Mercer, with Mercer being lower. And many buildings have steps on Mercer leading to the first floor. We're proposing steps on Mercer, and we'll see examples later. The two buildings were joined internally sometime between 1921 and 1954. The one on the left was built in 1891 to 92, designed by Brunner and Tryon. And the one on the right, the larger building, was built in 1911 to 12 and designed by V. Hugo Kohler. Our scope is to replace the 665 Broadway storefront, that's the 1912 building, and to on Mercer to replace the storefronts and add 2 sets of stairs. There'll be signage, but that's going to be staff level. These are the on the top left is the older building in 1910, right before the other one was built, and then both of them in 1975. At bottom are the buildings in about 1940. The idea for 665 Broadway is to bring the storefront closer, not replicate, but closer to the original. including restoring a canopy that you can see up there now, kind of beyond the trucks. These are the Broadway buildings in context. The storefronts are modern and have had a lot of alterations over the years. We know approximately the configuration of the storefront at 665, but we don't know the materials. As the building dates from about 1912, it could have been metal, and we are proposing a painted metal infill. Mike Carlton is going to take you through the design for Broadway.
Thank you, everyone. As Mary said, my name is Mike Carlton. I'm the architect for the proposed modifications to the building. What we're looking at here is a little more detail in terms of the grade change that is discussed from Broadway to Mercer Street. As you can see in the section at the top, Broadway is approximately 30 inches higher than Mercer Street. In the upper left corner of the plan, you see there's a grayed out area. That area designates the building's main electrical service room, which makes it impractical to try to lower the floor to the Mercer Street level in that area. What we're looking to propose on the Broadway side is the reintroduction of the canopy that can be seen in the historic photographs, as you can see on the bottom elevation here above the proposed storefront area, which would be bring back the central show window, again with aluminum framing and panels below at the bulkhead level. The transom grille above the north entrance, which is to the right, would remain as ventilation as it is today, but a more sensitive grille that starts to at least emulate what happens on the main building entrance tablet above that transom area on the left side there. And here we've simply provided a thumbnail sketch to better illustrate what conceptually we're looking to do for the Broadway side. Again, bringing back the canopy, the showcase window, and then of course some retail signage blade as part of the entrance to the storefront, all within LPC guidelines. Finishes and details, all new metalwork would be finished in a bronze color paint. We are looking at the upper portion of the second floor, which is the only remaining limestone on the building, to be cleaned so we can best understand the actual limestone color. The bottom floor area around the storefront and the rusticated columns are all a emulsion type of covering that cannot be removed, but we would apply a latex paint to that to best match to the limestone above and bring back the original feeling of the building. And I'll let Mary speak about the Mercer Street side.
Okay. This is Mercer. The Mercer playground is across the street, and there's a modern building just adjacent to the north. It's not the usual Mercer Street looking street front. Here are the two buildings in context. These are the storefronts. Both of them have modern infill. There are cast iron columns on 228. Remember, that's the 1892 building, and these are being retained. It's likely that there weren't any storefronts on Mercer. There really weren't a lot of storefronts on Mercer, but now Mercer is absolutely aligned with storefronts. 228 is divided into storefront-like bays by the cast iron columns, and we're maintaining that proportion. We're proposing metal infill to match the Broadway facade storefronts, and also the metal infill was less common in 1892, but it wasn't absolutely impossible. And we're mainly treating the buildings differently, but also using some of the same elements to show that they are one building, even though they look like two. And Mike is going to describe the design.
As stated earlier, the 30-inch height difference between Broadway and Mercer Street, that creates some real challenges for accessibility to this building. One of the central themes to doing this work is to make the building as passively accessible as possible for the neighborhood. The central part to that would be the main entrance at the 230 Mercer Street side. We're actually proposing to lower the floor in that area, as well as the elevator landings and everything that takes to get into the building to sidewalk level. Retail spaces to the left and to the right would also be similarly handled where they can be in terms of accessibility. And we can get into some of the following slides. This is just a little bit more of a detail looking at the 230 Mercer Street building in context with the upper floors, and as well as bringing in some of the details of the storefront systems, which would permeate all of the buildings. And again, a thumbnail sketch that illustrates what we're looking to achieve with the proposed renovations. So what we're looking at here, again, starting with the 230 Mercer Street entrance, on the left is the existing condition of the stoop. That is a step up, a single step up from the sidewalk with a ramp. We would lower that down to the sidewalk level, eliminating the ramp, obviously, and the stoop, and introducing a 3-foot canopy projecting off the building, but not engaging any of the historic elements of the building. Again, the materials in this elevation here would mimic the Broadway side. It is the same building or original building to each other. So it would be the bronze color paint. There is no limestone on the Mercer Street side. The existing painted brick is proposed to remain as is, and the existing granite base would be cleaned and restored. The elements that make up the retail portion of what would be known then as the 232 Mercer Street building would be, starting from the northernmost side, would be the introduction of a new stooped entrance. And you can see on the left-hand section there where it's noted this is to overcome the existing electrical room that's below in the cellar space in that area. As we move along south from the stoop, you can see on detail 3 the typical details of a storefront system with the panelized bulkhead, which is actually the upper portion of the electrical room. And then on detail number 4, we're creating a new protected entryway, which once inside there, a person would have accessibility to a ADA compliant lift. On the south side of 230, the address known as 228 Mercer Street. Now, this is the older building, the cast iron building that we are looking at. A similar approach is being proposed. We are taking the central section and having a stooped entrance to that. Because of the construction of the building, the cellar is already naturally set back about 16 inches. So it allows us a semi-recessed stoop, which would fit very nicely. Nothing is engaging on the cast iron work. We are proposing as part of this new storefront facade to reintroduce prism glass and zinc caming, and as well as using that zinc caming screen for where we have mechanical ventilation required. The stoop in this instance, or the risers of the stoop, we're proposing to be treated differently to give a little bit more variety between the retail storefront entrances. So we're simply proposing here what we see all over the area, the prism glass set within the risers. And because it is a different building from the other, we've changed the storefront paint color here to a slate gray to go a little bit more with the existing painted cast iron, which seems to be more of a oxidized gunmetal at this point. The furthest entrance south at the 228 building, again, would have a similar protected ADA compliant lift. So, basically that gives this entire building full ADA compliance, I think in a very well thought out way on the owner's behalf. They really wanted to do something that enhanced this particular part of the block. They recognize that the block is the last vestige of this area, both north and south of this building. The residential buildings really do not engage the Mercer Street side. And then just to round out, again, we would have retail signage blades again and working within LPC guidelines.
Mentioning the grade change, what I'm just taking you through are some all of the steps on Mercer Street, and there are a lot, and they're not all from the 1860s. These buildings are examples of buildings dating from the 1890s, and they're all on Mercer in the neighborhood. They're going to be in NoHo and in Soho because that's the length of Mercer Street. And here are still more that are from a little bit earlier, from the 1850s to 1890s, but it's a common street feature on Mercer. And that is our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum.
Can I ask you to take a look at the 230 Mercer Street bulkhead detail for a second? I don't remember what page that was on. I'm going. Right there.
Yeah.
Okay, 3. All right.
Right.
So it looks to me like the aluminum frame panel bulkhead finish to match storefront that you have is kind of proud of the brick. Is that the case?
It is currently
like a piece of granite there.
Right, exactly. There's a piece of granite that's applied to it. So we're looking to not go any further, obviously, than the face of that granite, but we're not sure of the conditions behind it.
So you didn't do a probe, right? You don't know what's behind it.
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Did I miss it, or were there no historic photos of the Mercer Street facade?
There were not, and there are not. There are practically no historic photos of Mercer Street. They just did not take photos of Mercer Street.
And then the one other question I
Buildings that face Broadway.
have is the canopy you're proposing to add. I didn't see any details of that.
On the Broadway?
On the Broadway, yeah.
Yeah, we have a profile of it.
Oh, you mean the,
Okay, so detail number 5 on the far right here, you can see the general dimensions, and we, as much as we can tell from the 1940s photograph, we're mimicking that shape.
And what's the material?
It would be painted aluminum to match the storefront.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, not seeing any questions at this time. We'll move to public testimony. Is there anyone in this room who'd like to speak on this item? Okay, well, no one in the room would like to speak, so I'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of sign-ups beforehand. So first we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC could support the design of this storefront replacement in theory, but we are unsure how the applicant chose their palette of materials and whether those materials are historically appropriate or based on original conditions. We ask that the LPC work with the applicant to confirm the appropriateness of the materials being presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society in New York. So Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. So if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society in New York. Now, the Victorian Society is happy to support most of the proposed ground floor alterations at the Broadway and Mercer Street facades of these two linked buildings. The removal of the pair of doors and decorative modern transom grills on the Broadway facade will not destroy any significant historic material. The new tripartite storefront infill is well proportioned, and the recreated historic canopy over the large display window will add depth and detail to this opening. The removals on the Mercer Street facade will eliminate modern infill, which has no relationship to the original facades. The proposed storefronts are well proportioned and detailed, and the signage shown is discreet. We are especially pleased to see the new recessed entrance stoop at 22 Mercer set between and emphasizing the historic cast iron piers and the use of prismatic glass at the transom. Although the proposed canopy on this facade is not an original feature of this building, we find that due to its simple detailing and minimal size, it will not draw attention away from any significant building features. However, we also question the proposed aluminum finished color, medium bronze, shown on LPC 08. This is the only paint color shown for metalwork on these buildings. We believe that the paint finish for both the storefront infill and the two canopies should be non-metallic. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thanks so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the restoration, infill modifications, addition of the two set of stairs on the Mercer Street side, approval of the canopy, provided that it does not have illumination below, and denial of the LED lighting along each at the two Mercer Street stairs. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments.
Thank you. Based on community board comments, we eliminated the LED lighting on the 232 stair, and there isn't any on the 228 stair. It's possible that that may be lit from the interior, but there's no exterior lighting anymore on the stairs. And I think in terms of the storefront finish, I think it was just kind of a confusion there, because it's a painted storefront that just happens to be a brown color, and that brown color is kind of bronze color, but it's not a metallic finish.
Yeah, I also just want to point out that there are two painted finish colors for the storefront: the slate gray of the 228 Mercer versus the bronze paint of the other building.
Okay. And I know it's a painted finish and not a metallic finish, but does the bronze read as just a dark brown? Is that?
That's correct. Okay. I do think going forward, we would want to work with LPC though, because we recognize that we still need to have cleaned the limestone and finalize the palette.
Okay, all right. So finishes, final finishes could be subject to review and approval by the staff in the field pending the cleaning of the masonry. Okay. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So,
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And commissioners, these are two buildings. One that is a through block building with frontage on Broadway and frontage on Mercer, and then the other adjacent building on Mercer Street. So we're looking at new storefront infill, stairs, and two canopies. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So overall, I think this is a very good project. And the work that's being done is going to enhance it, certainly making on the First Street adding in all of these spaces. And the modifications conceptually on both sides work, but I feel as though I think it's been referred to not only from some of the public comments we've had, but also from the applicant, that there's just a lot of detail work that is not clear, whether it's, the finish, what the finish of the paint colors are, or what it actually does look like. There's a little bit more investigation you might have to do to help uncover what the next steps are. So I think the most important thing, and it seems like these can be resolved, and worked on in a positive way with the staff to really come to the right decisions. So I would recommend that happen. And that as that, that I could approve this with that work being done with the staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I looking at this last night and thinking how complicated it was for this to analyze this. And it at the end, it was just very simple and well done. I can approve this. It's very well thought through.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I think it's a very good solution to provide ADA access and to really bring back the storefront to something more historic looking. I agree, though, that the applicant needs to work with staff on refining some of the storefront details and do some probes and work with the color.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree.
Commissioner Chen.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So I think we can make a motion to approve the proposal today with the condition that they continue to work with the staff to refine the details and do final review and approval of the colors in the field.
So, no matter docket 23 dash 09-236-65 Broadway, aka 228-232 Mercer Street, no Old Store District, a French Renaissance revival style store building designed by Brother and Tryon, built in 1891-92, the neo-Gothic style store and all buildings designed by Hugo Kohler, built in 1911 to 1912. The application is to replace store products. I know that the building style, scale, materials, and details are one of the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character in the Old Store District. I recommend approval of the application's finding.
that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features. That the proposed aluminum storefront systems on both Broadway and Greenwich feature display windows, single and pair panel doors, fixed single lighting, prismatic mechanisms, and panel heads will be in keeping with storefront infill found historically on buildings of this type, style, and age. In terms of overall proportions and composition of elements, the proposed with moss colored painted aluminum storefront framing will harmonize with the existing materials and finishes found at the doors of the building that is metal protection over the storefront on the Broadway facade will be all rigid elements of the storefront bound in the store text photograph with proposed downlights be well integrated with the design that the buildings historically featured a variety of canopies and all this now proposed West Street canopies and design scale for the style. That the entrance stoops featuring diamond plate steps, all lights set into the risers and handrails will be in keeping with these elements. Some comes down to storefronts and that's historic village. And that the upgrade entrance on Richard Street will allow very free access to the building in the least intrusive manner possible. However, I find that the details of the storefront will have to be for confinement. And I recommend that the applicant work with staff to refine these details of the storefront and can be sent also to do final review and approval colors of the field.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
A second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, so thank you. It's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on those details. Right, that concludes our morning session and we will now break for lunch and we'll return at 1:20 and we'll ask all members of the public to exit the meeting at this time. If you're in person, that means just leave the room. If you're in the Zoom meeting, please exit the Zoom meeting so that you don't have technical difficulties when you wish to return.